Oh, here's my cat on cue. Welcome, everyone. We're going to talk around story today. Welcome, Shauna. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mark.
For those who wouldn't have met Shauna, which is probably most because Shauna hasn't been on before, Shauna is an expert at the art of storytelling. And as I've come to discover in recent years, in fact, over the last 5 years, really, storytelling is absolutely vital, particularly if we want to build a business, any kind of business, really, but particularly a purpose led business. The power really is in our story. And Shauna recently led a really powerful session in my Pathway to Purpose group program. And the feedback I got at the end of that program was that that was one of the most powerful sessions of them all. And it's a session where we really went deep into our own past, our own hero's journey, which hopefully Shauna can share a bit more about what that means today. Uncovering the real gifts that we've uncovered, all the value that we've uncovered in our story, and how we can then turn that into a purpose led business or a personal brand that can help us to serve others with our unique gifts and then, create an abundant life for ourselves off the back of that. If we really want to connect and stand out in today's world, particularly an AI generated world, then story really is the key. So we're going to go into that today and what it means to uncover our story and share it with the world. But first of all, what about your own story, Sean? Let's delve into that. What has led you to where you are today in terms of helping people uncover their own story? What's your own story up to this point?
Thank you, Mark. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Madhavan, and I'm a story coach. I specialize in helping high achievers write stories with one intention, which is to connect with their truest, deepest selves, so that that self can lead their work, their careers, their businesses, their lives, and also their legacy. And thank you, Mark, for asking the question. Yes, about my own story, because we all, as you were saying, and we all have our own personal stories and journeys. Um, Not to go back too far back, but a little bit going back a little bit. I was one of those kids that loved stories, and the surest way to shut me up was to stick a book in my hand, pack me off to the library, and I was all about books, reading, and then subsequently writing and storytelling. And then I trained as a lawyer, and in my work in corporate law, commercial law, and then ultimately in human rights work, they won't say it now, people won't necessarily say it, but all of it's about story. So in the legal profession, in human rights world, you won't say, oh, well, that's a good story because, there's that flavor of fiction. But if you peel it all back, it's all story, and it's all about someone's journey from a place to somewhere else. And I could see that. I saw that in the years that I worked in the legal world and in the human rights world, and it brought me back. So around COVID time, I turned 50 in COVID, and I thought, you know what, it's time for a change. I felt something really inside of me saying, all that's been really good. The work you've done is great work, but something needs to change. And I trained as a transformative coach, but I still wanted to honor the storytelling part of me, the writer in me, the reader in me, the storyteller in me. So I thought about, well, other therapists and coaches, hypnotherapists, they all use story as a way to help their clients move forward, to break through blocks, change a perspective, heal something something that needs healing within you, and essentially figure your life out. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could write a story that would allow me to do that. And so I started doing that, and I still do that. And I've created a method, a step by step, a framework really to take a person through that. Something's going on in your life, you need to figure it out. Here's a story, here's a method to write a story that will help you figure things out for yourself. And it's what I do now. So that's essentially kind of the potted sort of summary about what it is. But that's pretty much what I do now. It's about using story writing very intentionally. It's not any old story. There's an intention behind it with a purpose and something to figure out in your life. So that's essentially how I've got to where I am at the moment.
Yeah, it does strike me that there's so many. I never knew this, but so many different uses for story. Like,
Yeah.
you think about, okay, if you want to write a book, then obviously that's all about telling a story. As I've started writing a book myself, actually, and I'm kind of delving into my story and uncovering it. And that's what I've done over the last 5 years or so, is really get clear on my own story and
Yeah.
then the unique value that it holds. It just strikes me that someone might be listening to this podcast now, they might be in a bit of a transition. So many people I connect with, they've been doing the whole corporate thing for decades, and they feel like, okay, I'm looking for something a little bit more purposeful in my life, as I experienced after 20 years in advertising. And I remember thinking at that time, I was exploring different business models and affiliate marketing. I did some pet portraits. I was doing first of all. I tried freelance design as well. And I hadn't really done this deeper work around story. And what I found is that I'd hit the same wall or blocks, really. I was kind of, some of them made money, some of them didn't. Particularly in the world of affiliate marketing, that basically is using someone else's story to sell a particular product, and you earn a commission off the back of it if someone signs up.
Mm.
And what I discovered then was that something was missing. I was essentially learning about digital business. I was learning about sales. I was learning about online marketing, but nothing was really happening. I wasn't connecting with anybody really. And the big shift for me happened when I started working with a purpose coach, and we went through my life story basically, and we
Mm.
started plotting out and detailing the incidents in my life that helped me uncover some particular value and gifts that I could then use to serve others. And that led me then took me over a series of years to align with what I do today, helping people effectively uncover their own purpose. But what is that process then? If someone is coming to this now and they're thinking, well, I'd love to build a purpose-led business. I'd love to create a life of freedom and financial overflow for myself. What is how do we take someone through their own life, their own history, and then uncover what might be the value that they've gleaned, and how can they serve others? What is the hero's journey in essence to you?
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of stories on this podcast.
Let me tell you a short story, and let's see. Maybe that might sort of give it a bit of illustrate it a bit better. But
Mm.
once upon a time, there was a young lion cub, much loved by his parents, and he was destined to take over his father's kingdom. But dad's very evil brother killed the father, and the lion cub, believing it was his fault, full of shame, full of guilt, ran off into the wilderness. And that, of course, is Simba and the Lion King,
Yeah,
right? So
Lion
that's that
King.
story. And off he goes into the wilderness, builds a life for himself there. Easy, good life with his friends. Nothing really to stress him out. Life was happy there. And then Nala comes along and says, "What on earth are you doing here? You're needed back home. Jeremy Irons and Whoopi Goldberg have devastated the Pride Lands. What are you doing here?" And he refuses it. He says, "No, I'm not going back. This is
Mm.
my place. That's not my home." And then Rafiki comes along and says, "Your father lives in you." And I think this is probably the most important line in the movie story is, remember who you are.
Mm.
Remember who you are. And he does. And he races back home, confronts his past, confronts the shame, confronts the guilt because he believed that he was responsible for his father's
Yes.
death. Uh, Confronts, of course, his uncle, integrates, accepts the past, integrates it into himself, battles the monster, well, the baddie, the uncle,
Mm.
overcomes, and claims his rightful place as the king and in charge, well, the king of Pridelands. And something that I think was also really interesting about sort of part of the hero's journey is this idea that you acquire a gift, and it's not just for yourself in the end, it is for your world, his world. And he brought that gift back to the people, and a wisdom and a gift. So that's really a classic hero's journey story. The hero goes out, something happens, he leaves his ordinary world, something triggers it. So that's the the inciting incident. He goes off on an adventure, trials and tribulations, challenges, and then he comes to the end of that journey and usually would have acquired a gift or a wisdom.
Mm,
But a real story, the real story here is the inner transformation that happens
mm,
on the journey, in the adventures. He goes from believing himself to be nothing to finally stepping into his the real person that he is, the person he always was but denied. And in doing so, grows, transforms, and brings that gift to his world at that time of that period of that story. So that is the hero's journey. It is the external events of the plot of the story are just there to help the to lead the protagonist into his transformation. So that sort of in a nutshell really is the hero's journey.
and then why is it so important to uncover that for ourselves in your experience? I mean, I know the power of it because I've experienced it from my own work, but what do you see as the real value in uncovering that for ourselves, and where does it how can it benefit us?
The reason I think, well, the hero's journey, firstly, and this is something you and your audience would already know, but Joseph Campbell, so mythologist, studied all the stories of the world, religious stories, cultural stories, myths, fables, legends, and the one pattern that he discovered out of all the research and writing and thinking about it that he did was that all these stories are a pattern of transformation. And the outcome of that was that these are not just stories, these are how we live. These stories are how we as humans move through our lives and through, well, through the ages and through the centuries. So the stories are not just about storytelling, it reflects how we already live, depending on where, it didn't matter where you were geographically in the world throughout the different ages. So the hero's journey is such an important, it's certainly not the only way in which you can tell a story, but it is a very, you will see it appearing everywhere in many of the story
Yes.
format. And the reason it's a very powerful tool, shall we say, or a framework, is because it already reflects how we live. And if you're able to, and maybe this is something your audience might like to do, is to download from the internet sort of all the different stages of the, you can find it quite easily, or I can certainly share the resources if that would be helpful, and to take it and to kind of in a way plot your way through the different there are 17 stages in the hero's journey, but you don't need all of them. You can just pick out the few that sort of speak to you and resonate with you, and you can plot your life that way. And what you're doing then is you are allowing yourself to reflect on your journey so far, and in doing so come to see and understand how some of the things that have happened to you. I mean, we are made up of a combination of different things, success and achievement, the good things in our lives, but we also, of course, are made up of the sadness and the griefs, the failures perhaps, and the things the challenges of our lives. So we are a combination of all of that. And the hero's journey helps you step back a little and have a look at your life, plot it out if that helps you, or talk to a coach, talk to a counselor, talk to someone, a trusted advisor, to see then the turning points. And this is quite a popular, well, not popular, but it is a terminology in storytelling, the turning point at the end of a chapter when something happens and redirects the story somewhere else. So that's in all our lives, again, because stories reflect how we've lived our lives. We all have those turning points, a career change, for example, or you get
Mm,
married, or you have a child, or you fall ill. They're all turning points in your life. And these turning points are very often good indicators for you to kind of make sense of your life so far. And most likely you're going to find moments where, oh, I learned this. I found this out about myself. I got this bit of wisdom. And these are the things then that you use to reflect, to think, all right, what's my life been all about? And where is it going? Where do I want it to go?
mm. Yeah, I love that. It is when you say that. I mean, it's everywhere, isn't it? That hero's journey. I mean, pretty
Yeah,
much every 99% of films that are made are that
yeah,
hero's journey. I mean, sometimes you get one that is doesn't quite match that. I'm just thinking of a No Country for Old Men, where usually it's the good guy, the hero, goes on the journey. I'll just go over the key stages in a moment, but effectively they go into the darkness and then they're reborn and come out and overcome that darkness. But sometimes in some stories, of course, the darkness wins out and we don't get the full story. But usually that's what we see. As you say, every Disney movie, Lord of the Rings is obviously the classic one. Star Wars, where he kind of goes in there and he defeats his father, and then he comes through and becomes this new heroic version of himself.
Yeah.
And it really strikes me, particularly in this age of social media, I found this, if you're looking to then build a personal brand, which I think is a really powerful way of uncovering your own, is a journey of self-discovery in effect, and personal empowerment. I think a personal brand, instead of going from a career where you're like a consumer, work is given to you, a regular paycheck is given to you, and you can kind of it's nice, it's stable, it's secure, but it's not particularly, it limits your growth. I think that way of working, as I found. And I think for a lot of people that's fine. For a lot of people get called to something much deeper than that. And I think a personal brand is a great way of doing that, creating a life of freedom and financial overflow and real fulfillment through your work. And what I discovered on that path is story is absolutely essential. And I can tell the creators who've really done that deep work into their own story and those that haven't, those that have built a business with and don't particularly share their story. And I find that their posts don't have that emotional connection. A lot of creators, a lot of business owners will just share their unique process or insights, or they'll provide some knowledge or value, which is great. But I always find, well, I do that as well, by the way, but I always find that these posts that really connect, that get the most engagement and get the most people moving, to click that link and, sign up for my offer, whatever it is, they're the ones where I've shared a story. And there was one post that I put out last week where as just an example, most of the posts I put out, I'll share a win I've had with a client. As I said, a particular insight that's key to my program. Now and again, I'll just share one that is my unique story. And I talked about how I got engaged at Machu Picchu to my wife, and then, which was like a highlight of my life, wonderful time in my life. We explored 3 weeks in Peru together. After that, there was a moment where I realized that there was something missing in my life. I came back to my work, my corporate job in the city of London, looked out on the city around me and realized how lost I was, that I was disconnected from nature, from myself, from my purpose. And it created a psychological split within me that sent me into 7 years of mental health issues, essentially. And then the journey was of me slowly healing myself, working with different monks, shamans, coaches, and uncovering my own purpose. And then over a period of years, realizing that, I'd uncovered all these gifts that would help other people to uncover their purpose and who are going through a similar difficult time in their lives. And when I shared that post, I mean, usually I might get sort of like 1,000 or 1,500 impressions. That got 25,000 impressions, 17 leads, and I got 3 calls booked off the back of it. And a lot of the comments were just about how touched they were by the story, and also a key aspect of the story is how my wife had stuck with me through the whole journey. When she didn't have to, I went through my dark night of the soul. She stuck with me while I went through all this, and obviously I shared how I came out the other side of it. But there are obviously then key aspects, aren't there? There are key points in that hero's journey that I shared. And I wonder if you could share what those key aspects are then. I mean, obviously I've shared kind of an overview of what my story was, but what are the key aspects to that hero's journey then, Shauna, that are so important to when we begin sharing it?
I think, and thank you so much for that. That's a very vulnerable story you shared, and I did read the post, and it was a wonderful post. Great photo of you up on the.
Oh yeah, exactly. The photo is key as well, isn't it?
As well, that's right. I mean, of course, photographs are, the visual storytelling. But maybe I just step back a little bit to sort of talk a little bit about story, there's brain science behind this, and why all your the impressions that you had, and the connections, and the comments and the leads that you got. The story, a good story, I should say, because not all not all stories will
Mm.
probably do that. But a good story, what it does is it kind of hacks your brain a little bit. There's there's a sort of science around why stories are so compelling, and why we relate to it, and it resonates so powerfully with us. It's We are hardwired for story, and I think I may have said this before when we were talking, but we are hardwired for story, and that really means that we have evolved to lean into stories. And from way back, it was a survival instinct. It's how we learned to survive the physical world. Don't pet that lion over there, because it's not going to end well for you. We learned through each other, through storytelling. And then as we became more sophisticated, and we had to learn to navigate the social world, and we needed to learn how to figure out what she believes and what he thinks. And stories was again the way in which we learned how other people functioned, so that we knew then how to stay safe. Now, not no longer lions, but kind of, maybe, depending on what we're talking about in the social world.
Yeah,
Um,
metaphorical. Yeah.
Metaphorically, absolutely, it's the lions and dragons out there. But we had to learn. So stories then became part of our evolution as well. We learned we needed it. It's no longer just a nice to have. We needed it to survive, and not just survive. We listened to stories to figure out, yes, how you survived, but also how you thrived. How can I thrive when I listen to your stories? And, and what's really interesting about stories is that they did an fMRI scan on people who are consuming a story, and they said that when you're consuming a story, you're not an observer. You step into the shoes of the protagonist, of the person who the story is about. So you are no longer an observer. You are a participant in that story that you are consuming, whether you're watching it or reading it. And a very nice example of this is if you go to a cinema and you watch a horror movie, and you turn and look at the people behind you. We're all watching the movie through fingers, or nervous. And that's because their brain is telling them they are facing that horror. And of
Mm.
course, logically, no, because it's not. But your brain has tricked you into thinking you are in the shoes of the person that's, that horrific thing is happening to. So I think when we understand that, that's how stories affect us and connect with us and persuade us, certainly in our businesses, but also in our lives. Then you kind of really understand why a good story, a compelling story, does the magic that it does. And so, coming
Mm.
back to your sort of I think your question around, I think your question is the turning points within your own story. What were the
Those key
compelling
points. I mean,
points?
I'm just looking at the hero's journey, and as
Mm,
Shauna said, anybody could find this online. But essentially, there are stages, aren't they? Call to
yeah,
adventure,
yeah,
the threshold, challenges and temptations, the revelation or the abyss, and then the transformation, atonement, and return.
yeah.
I'm just wondering if you could give a bit more information on those actual stages of the hero journey. If someone is trying to plot this out for themselves at the moment.
Sure, sure. So I think if you look on the internet, there's so many different versions of it, but I'm just going to speak to the sort of the core basic idea that Joseph Campbell talked
Mm.
about. And so you are in your ordinary world, and that's where you would have started perhaps prior to Machu Picchu, for example. You're in your ordinary world, and it's usually the safe world. It's predictable, it's certain. And then something happens. An inciting, it's what they call the inciting incident. Something happens, that's the call to adventure. So different writers and storytellers, or people who talk about stories, will use different language around it, but essentially it's that the call to adventure, it's the inciting incident, and it tips you, the protagonist, into your journey, into your story. You can refuse, and it sounds to me you did not refuse the call.
I had no
You spent
choice.
a bit of, you had no choice,
Absolutely
yeah,
no choice.
perhaps, and it might well have been that the call happened. I don't know. You would know better. From your
Probably
memories
was
of.
being called before that and didn't
Yes,
refuse. But when it that's the thing, isn't it? When it comes to the call is it will get, you can refuse and it'll get stronger, and you can refuse again and it gets stronger, and you'll get to the point where you have no choice. You've got to
Yeah,
do this or you're not
yeah,
going to survive, your old
yeah.
world. So you have to step into the new world. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it sounds so you answered the call and you sort of spent time, and so you went. And this is a journey, a metaphorical journey. It's an inner journey, inward. You go inward to try and figure things out. You saw the coach. So what often a lot of people would say is also when you have answered the call, you cross the first. There are a couple of thresholds. So the first threshold is you now leave the ordinary world, and you go out into the world or into the woods, or into the desert, or into wherever it is,
Mm.
Simba. And you are now on your journey, and you are now going to meet all the monsters. These, well, you will have helpers, and for example, your wife would have been
Mm.
one of the helpers, and that is one of
Yeah.
the archetypes of the hero's journey. Is you have the
Yes.
helper, a wise person, a coach, your wife, a loving
Yeah.
person, and you also then meet uh, the the monsters, the challenges, the
Mm.
trials, the obstacles, and you're always building up to a bigger monster and a bigger monster. So you're building your capacity to fight these monsters a little at a time. And the
Mm.
journey goes on that way. And then eventually there is, I think you call what you referred to the dark night of the soul. And that's a really beautiful, powerful um, phrase because it captures really perfectly that moment of absolute, you're really in the dark.
Yes.
And Joseph Campbell talks about it at going into the cave. You're going into the cave. There's metaphorical cave to sort of, if you think of a cave, it's dark, you don't know where you're going, it's very otherworldly, but you're going in there because you have to, because at the end of it, in the cave is the gift, is the prize, is the elixir, in the language of Joseph Campbell. And ultimately what that means then is you, as you move towards the sort of the end of the journey, so to speak, because the journey really never ends, you have to confront the biggest antagonist, the biggest monster, the thing that is the monster of monsters. And in some of the stories, Harry Potter, for example, or any of the other sort of mainstream movies, it is that moment where you are fighting the guy, the bad guy. Usually, and maybe this is something you would be able to speak to. Usually, there is a kind of death,
Mm.
a physical
Oh,
death,
yes.
or a spiritual death. There
Ego
will be
death.
that
Yeah.
moment before a resurrection. So there will be a resurrection. So you think again of Harry Potter in the first movie. I think it's the first movie. Oh, well, certainly in the last movie, the last books, he dies. He does die, and he goes up to King's Cross and has a chat with Dumbledore, and then he chooses and he comes back. But there is a spiritual death, if not a physical one. I'm wondering whether you would describe that for yourself when you kind of reach
I
that
I
pinnacle.
mean, I literally experienced several ego deaths because I was probably, might be able to see the artwork behind me. That's all plant medicine artwork, and I went to
Yeah,
Peru, for example, drank ayahuasca in the middle of the Amazon, and experienced ego death. And again, I experienced it when I worked with the medicine in the UK as well. So literal ego death, where I
yeah,
disappeared as a personality and experienced myself as pure awareness, and I that several times. So
yeah.
literally, that was the case for me. Ego death multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's again part of the journey. You do. There's some kind of death, which is really the old self. You're dying to your older self, and you are
Mm.
being reborn into your new self. And then what happens is once that you've fought the bad guy, you fought the monster, you are resurrected into your new self. You have a gift or gifts, a prize, a wisdom. It can be many things, and you return to your world changed. And in fact, the gift that you take back home with you changes that world. So you're now in a new world. So you've started in this world, you've gone on a long journey, you've had help, you fought the monsters, you've died, and you're resurrected with a boon or a gift or a prize. You head home to a new world, and all of it's changed because you have transformed. You're the hero, you've transformed, and you've brought a gift back for yourself and for your community and for your world,
Mm.
for your clients, for your customers, for if you're an educator, for everyone. Your world is now born anew because of your transformation, and you're now in your new world. And then the cycle will start all over again. At some point in your new
Mhm.
world, something will happen. There will be another and new call to adventure that you go on again. So that's really how I kind of, from what you've told me about your journey, I sort of see it through the prism of that hero's journey in that way. How does that sound? Does it
Yes.
feel? Does that feel like?
Yeah, and the important thing is there's a couple of things I want to touch on, which is that's fantastic. Thank you, Shauna. A couple of things I want to touch on is that what you're doing is you're essentially sharing why you were effectively born to do this, what you're doing now, and you're linking it then to your offer, whatever that is. It's like, well, clearly this person was born to do this because their whole life has been leading up to this point, and they're the perfect person to work with around this particular pain point that I've got. And they're it just makes it you're making it absolutely abundantly clear that that you're the perfect person to be doing this, whatever you're doing, coaching or consulting or whatever that thing is. The other thing I want to add is that, I mean, you can probably tell my journey matches up perfectly with this. I mean, literally, I went into my own dark night of the soul from my mental health issues and then died in the jungle of the Amazon working with plant medicine with these shamans and then slowly healed myself and then came to do what I do now. But someone might be listening to this and thinking, well, I don't have quite a dramatic story like that. All I want to do is do some consulting or freelancing, But
Yeah.
there are still lots of examples I see online where people are sharing story around that. Perhaps I see some creators that I follow talking about, well, I was in this corporate career and I just felt like I wasn't thriving, and then there was a turning point. They haven't gone into like a big dark night of the soul, fought loads of monsters, but you can tell they still use story as a way to show and engage people, and then I built this business and now I help this kind of person. Or even one of our mentors in the community with now, he talks about this. I mean, he essentially is coaching entrepreneurs in groups, and he talks about this garage sale he had when he was younger, and he was selling all these bits and pieces that he found in the garage, and the guy came up and said, how much is this? He gave the price. He said, can I speak to your father about it? Because he was only young. And his father came out and said, the guy, he said to his father, oh, this guy wants to know how much this is. He wants to question it. And his father said, well, it's yours. It's your business. Speak to him. And so that made the little child feel so empowered.
Yeah.
And that was his start of the journey to entrepreneurship. But you can just see it doesn't have to be a big hero's journey of death and rebirth. It can be just sharing a story about how you came to this point, why what you're doing is perfect for you. So like I said, those are the kind of posts you need to create. Stories create an emotional connection. Otherwise, if you're just sharing value for people, that's great, but they're not really going to move people on an emotional level. It's that story that really connects and moves people. And also, it doesn't mean that you have to share some big emotional story every time. They're like four out of five of my posts are just value. Oh, here's what I experienced this week with my clients. Here's why, for example, well-being should always be your main focus when you're building a business. Or here's why you need to start with purpose when building a business. That isn't so much, not, but I would try and include some story in there. Like 20 years of corporate, I realized I wasn't fulfilled. And then try and take it on from there. So I'm always trying to build my own story into it, because if you don't, particularly in this new AI generated marketplace we're in, you just blend in with the sea of sameness. I see it all the time. People just using AI to create content, and you don't stand out, you don't emotionally engage, and you will not connect with anybody. So this is why story and sharing and going to your own personal story is so important in today's world. Particularly if you're looking to build a personal brand or a business of your own.
Yeah, I
Would you
think
say the same, Shauna? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Coming back to sort of, the idea of stories and why, we do see a lot of people are talking about, oh, your brand and story for
Mm.
marketing, and it's everywhere. And there's a reason it's everywhere. It's because people have kind of figured out that that's the connecting point. Excuse me. And I think it's really useful to remember that for all the data out there, and you can share data and stats and things like that, and we've seen in politics and in our own social worlds why data doesn't cut anywhere the way stories do. And that's because a story connects with us on an emotional level. It it hits us emotionally. It's not a logical
Yeah.
thing.
And that's what
And
moves people
when
ultimately, isn't it? Is that
Yeah,
emotional
that's the
connection?
thing.
Yeah.
At the absolutely at the very core of it, it speaks to our emotions, and everything we do, we cannot make a rational decision or a logical decision without an emotional coming from an emotional place.
Mm.
Because we are just emotional people. We will not be moved by stats and numbers. I'm just going to turn my
Mm.
light on. I just realized it's gotten really quite dark. Um,
Strange
Sorry
weather in the
about
UK
that.
at the moment.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit bright now. But it is an emotional thing. Stories are an emotional thing, and if you can, and that's why if you've got a post or a story that you're sharing with your audience, if it can connect to their emotional depth, then that's the real connection, and they're going to be able to sort of put themselves. And from what I said earlier to just now, when you're listening and consuming a story, you will step in and you're a participant of the story.
Mm.
You're not an observer. So if you can bring your audience along with you into your story, and in some sort of magical way, when you're telling a story, they step into the shoes of the participant. You've got
Mm.
them feeling along with you. And when they're feeling with you, that's far more powerful than just throwing numbers and stats or and I think you were saying about other content sharers there, they talk about, oh, do this and do that in 5 steps.
Mm.
Yeah, all of that's
Five
great.
tips. Yeah, yeah.
The 5 tips, the hacks that you can do, that's great, yes, to an extent. If you're able to weave a story into that, and a personal one, because that's what you're trying to do here, that just tips it into something else. It
Yes.
elevates the post or the story that you're trying to share. And that's again a biological evolutionary thing that happens to us. We don't have a choice. When we are listening to a good story,
Mm.
we have no choice in the matter. Our brains and our bodies are just leaning into that story, wanting to know, how did you survive? How did you thrive? What
Yeah.
can
Want
I
to know the
do?
end?
How can I do,
Yeah.
make this for myself? Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important as well for building trust, isn't it? Like that's the thing. It's like you go from some random guy who's online who I don't know to somebody I know. And that's the thing. You're not going to buy from
Yeah.
someone unless you trust them. You have to be able to trust them. And that's the thing. If you're allowing people into your life and your story, emotional connection, that builds trust. And then that's what ultimately decides if someone's going to work with you or not, in whatever capacity that is. The other question I wanted to ask, I think there's a balance then between being vulnerable, which I think is really important, and it's difficult, I know, because there's lots of private stuff that you don't necessarily want to share with the world, but this is part of building a personal brand, and perhaps oversharing. Do you think there's a balance to be found there between being authentic, sharing your story, and perhaps being going too far, and perhaps sharing stuff that's too private?
I think, yeah, absolutely. Any content creator, anyone sharing anything is going to have to sort of grapple with that. How much to share or not, as the case might be, and what's the line? And of course, when you're sharing a story, you're bringing in the other people in the story who may not necessarily have, given you consent or are happy about you
Yes.
talking about, your boss or your colleague or whatever it is. So it's important to sort of bear that tension, that conflict, or well, not a conflict, but that tension between the story you want to tell, being authentic, but also the other concerns around that. I think for myself, what I kind of think of when I'm trying to answer this question is I ask myself, what is my motive for this piece that I'm sharing? Why am I sharing it? If I'm sharing it to illuminate, to serve my clients, to illustrate something, to share an insight, to free them, to offer some kind of liberation from something, if they are at the heart of my motive, my clients, serving them, or my wider audience, then that's okay. If, on the other hand, I'm sharing the story for validation, personal validation,
Mm.
recognition, for control, I want to control how other people think about me and how they look at me and
Mm.
how they view me. If I'm doing that, and then in that case, I am at the heart of the center of that story. In which case, then my motives are different. My motives are not the right motives then.
Right.
So
Are you
it is
serving or
about,
not? Mm.
are you serving someone, your audience, or are you serving yourself? I think if one was to ask that question of yourself when you're about to post something, I think it will more or less guide you in the right direction and help you choose or decide what you're doing there.
Yeah, I think it's important. I do think I really like it when thought leaders, coaches, experts, they share their struggles as well as their wins. Because the temptation is when you're a coach, it's like, well, you want to share. Oh, I've got my life is perfect and everything's working well because I'm this amazing coach and everything I teach is amazing and I do the same thing and everything's worked out well. But I think I love it when people will just be honest about their human experience because that's not reality. There's always going to be challenges that come up. So to be able to say, you know what, last week I was feeling really stuck, like really confused as to what to do or where to go. But then you want to always come round to the lesson you've learned out of that. Oh, well, I was able to, whatever it is, sit with it, feel through it, and then I got some clarity on the other end of it. So if you're always sharing about how lost and confused and stuck you are, then that's probably not the best thing either. There is a balance to be found, isn't there, between
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
raw and authentic and vulnerable and um, overstepping it and people seeing you as not a person they particularly want to connect with and
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah. I think if you're in the midst of something, if you're going through something very difficult in your life and you're in the midst of it, you're still
Mm.
processing it for yourself, trying to understand it, then it may not be the right time to do
Yeah,
that, to
that's
share
difficult
that.
to do.
Yeah, you have to come past it. You must have come through it and past it
Right.
and then share it at that point. And then your audience won't feel uncomfortable because,
Mm.
maybe if it's too soon, they might be uncomfortable. It just won't resonate. Whereas if you've passed through it, you've healed what needs to be healed or worked it out or made sense of it and you reconciled what you needed to reconcile over on the other side and then you're sharing sort of in retrospect in a way it's a far more powerful complete authentic way of sharing yourself with the audience.
Yeah, I love that. Well, on that subject then, because I noticed that you do this, it's when you're in the middle of something and you're able to use story to help you reframe or move beyond something. And I know you're going through something very difficult at the moment. What does that look like? A practical example of how this looks in your life when a challenges come up or difficulties arise, because it's part of the human experience, as we know, we're gonna get hit by something at some point. So how can story help us with a particularly challenging situation that we experienced in our lives?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I'd share a little bit. I mean, this last weekend, I'd said to you earlier, Mark, that our cat died. She was a much loved, very beloved cat, and we'd had her. She was a rescue cat, and very much part of the fabric of our days, our mornings and afternoons and evenings. And going downstairs now is a bit of a, oh my gosh, because she's
Mm,
not there anymore. So there's a lot of sadness. And I know some people, certainly my family members, they know who they are thinking, it's just a pet, it's just a cat.
right.
What's the big deal? Why would you care? It's not like someone died. It's not like a human died. But depending on how you feel about cats and dogs and pets
Mm,
generally. But for me, it was a very grievous thing, and I am grieving, and I know I am sort of
mm,
going through that process. And for this, and certainly for all the things, the years that have passed, I've sort of used my own method on myself. But
mhm,
essentially, what I do is I write stories. So it's a very intentional story, and I have started writing a story to help me process this, to come to terms with this loss. But what I do is I have a 5 step method for that I use, which is, and I use it with my clients as well, which is what's the thing that you want? What's the thing that's going on with you right now? What's happening with me right? All right, I'm really, really sad that Maxine, my cat, has died. And I want to make sense of what it means and the loss and how to make sense of it and how to go through this, let this grief anyway come through me, pass through me.
mm.
So that's what I want to achieve. Right. What's getting in the way of this? Well, I'm feeling really sad and I miss her so much. And she's, the days in the house, everything feels rather empty. And then the thing that's really important is, and this is what I talk about in my program and I share with my clients is you come up with, well, I come up with associations, words that I connect with the thing that I want to achieve, which is, and in this particular case, I'm not quite clear yet what my intended goal is. What do I really want to achieve? Do I want to feel better? Do I want to move on? What is it? So that's something that I'm still clarifying as I write. But essentially, you come up with 6 or 7 words that are associated with the result you want, which is, for example, it could be reconciled to my loss. And I come up with a few words so what you're doing when you're coming up with those associated words is you are priming your imagination, your creativity, your unconscious. You are telling it unconsciously, telling it, this is where I want to go. This is the direction in which I'm journeying. And then you write your story. So you know what the problem is, you know what's getting in the way, you know what you want to achieve, and you have a bridge. And those are the associated words. You have a bridge to where you want to be. And then I write a story. And it might be a very simple story. It doesn't, and it's not about the story. It's not about writing a story that's going to get accepted into an
Mm.
anthology of stories or win any prizes. It is really purely for myself. And the way it works is as you're writing your story, your unconscious is in the background going, oh, that's what you want to do. I see, okay. But you're not doing that consciously. Consciously, you're focused on the plot. So once upon a time, there was this that happened, and this person went on a journey. I'm just sort of, paraphrasing it, obviously. But as you are engaged consciously, you're engaged with the storyline. Your unconscious is figuring out what's going on and what it is you'd like to achieve. And at the end of the story, and if it's a big thing, like for me, it's grief, it's sadness, it's loss, it's death, it won't happen right away. It
Yeah.
might need a few stories. It might need a few weeks and a few months because it's a big thing. But I've also used the same method for smaller, well, less dire things, which is I'm feeling stuck in my daily work.
Yes.
This is the story. This is what I can write for myself. I'm feeling stuck. Or I really don't think I'm working fast enough. Or I'm just not good enough for this sort of thing. I just can't, there's so many things
Mm.
that's going on in our minds which come kind of block us or prevent us from moving forward. And a story like this then is, right, I want to feel unstuck. That's the outcome that I'm looking for.
Mm.
And then I take myself through that process and I write a little story. And very often what happens is, without realizing it, because it's happening unconsciously, there's a shift at the end. I might have shared with you before, Mark, but I had this time when I was like, ooh, talking in groups, it's not my comfort. I'm a terrible
Mm.
introvert, not my comfort place to be talking in a group. So, and I thought, no, I can't I want to be able to speak in a group and not feel, sort of the spotlight on me. So I
Intimidated.
wrote a
Mm.
story. Yeah, exactly. So I wrote a story and I didn't really think much of it. I just wrote the story and I'm like, okay, fine, the story's done, great. But the next time I went to a group event, everything had shifted. I was able to sit there
Wow.
and, own the space, take the space, say what I wanted to say. And then I thought about it. Wow, that really was very powerful. I hadn't really realized until at the very end of all of that shift happened. And it was through that little story that I'd written. And it sounds
Mm.
so very, oh, well, just a little story. But actually what you're doing is you are rewiring something it's rewiring a part of your mind or your brain or the beliefs that you have about something. You're rewiring it through the power of story and your creativity and your imagination. And that's the
Mm.
journey. That's kind of what I do, mostly every day, actually, and what I share with my clients and get them to do as well.
Yes, I can understand. I mean, I haven't done exactly that. I did. Well, I remember being very nervous about my wedding speech, and I did
Mm,
I just took my mind for a visualization of, all right, let me just imagine, because what the mind tends to do is look at the worst case scenario and replay it over and over again, because it essentially is trying to solve problems, to look out for the threats, basically. So it just replays the greatest fear. If you take the mind and use it in a positive way and go, okay, what if this day panned out perfectly? And it all went well, and I gave the speech, and everyone loved it and applauded, and it went fantastic. I allowed myself to just visualize the day going well, and then after that visualization, the fear wasn't there anymore. It was
mm,
interesting, and the day did go really well. But
yeah,
it strikes me as a similar way to just kind of use the
yeah,
mind in a positive way than its default, which is just negative, basically.
yeah.
And that's interesting, because the story you gave around getting unstuck, I think you were a seahorse. You've written about a seahorse or something,
That's
wasn't
right. It
it?
was a
So it was
seahorse.
completely
Yeah, that's
different.
right.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
a very
yeah.
different story to what was actually happening. But
Yes, yeah.
again, it
And
has
the
the
thing is,
same
what
similar
happens when
effect.
you're so sorry to interrupted you there. But
Carry
what I
on,
was going
carry
to
on.
say is that when you're writing the story, you don't really know where because it's your imagination is
Mm.
taking you there. You've set your imagination, you've given your imagination the freedom to take you where you need to go. And your wisdom in there, your own wisdom, your imagination has the answers which your conscious mind may not have. But because you're drawing from your imagination, it knows where it wants to go. It knows what it knows. It's your wisdom, and your imagination takes you there. And that's when you talk about the visualization that you did for your wedding speech. What you did then, I'm sure you know that, is you were connecting your imagination, your creativity,
Mm.
and that's the superpower. I always think of creativity and imagination as the absolute superpower that we have, which for so many people is untapped. We don't this
Mm.
the logical analytical mind is so powerful. Mine is trained as a lawyer. My logical self is very powerful, but really our powerhouse, our superpower is our imagination. And once we can, not I was going to say hack, but not hack. Once we can access that,
Tap
once we
into it.
can tap
Yeah.
into it, it's boundless. The possibilities are boundless in how we change, how we think about ourselves, other people, the world. It's a tremendous gift to be able to do that. And the thing is, we all
Mm.
have that capacity. It's just unlocking, it's figuring it out. And for me, it's through story, because that's my bag and that's my thing, and that's the thing I'm sort of
Mm.
obsessed about. Just to say also, a lot of people do journaling, and that is also a
Yes.
great way to walk yourself through things. What I found, and I did journaling for a long time as well, and it's a great tool. But what I found about journaling and how it's different from story is, with story you step back. In journaling, you're very present in it. It's the eye moving through
Mm.
the event or whatever's happening. But in story, you're a third party. You're sorry, in the sense that you've stepped back. You're not the protagonist. You are kind of the protagonist, but you're not the protagonist. And that distance allows you a lot of leeway, a lot of freedom and
Mm.
liberation, and possibility that the eye point of view in journaling may not always have. So for me, that
Right.
the journaling is great, but story has a different dimension to it that makes it even more powerful as far as the work that I've done.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I've done a lot of journaling in the past, and it's helped me through difficult times. I find that I just kind of free write initially, just write out the
Yeah,
worst case scenario, the real,
yeah,
all the problems, what could possibly go wrong. And once I find that I've got that out of the way, things become a bit lighter, and I realize that when I'm writing, it's like, oh, actually, I'll be fine. By the end of right, I usually try and write an A4 page. By the end, it's okay, but I can really understand how story could make it easier to tap into some of these fears where it might be that you might be just blocked off from because it's so real to you. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
beautiful. Well, I hope there people are abundantly clear now why story is absolutely essential.
yeah,
And the thing
yeah,
is, it becomes once you've done that work around story, um, writing posts, creating content becomes so enjoyable. I absolutely love.
mm,
I always find it so easy to write posts. I write five posts a week on social media, and it's so I really enjoy the process. I just love writing stories anyway.
mm,
Um, whereas I remember when I was a graphic designer, I I would never have written a post on put it on social media about graphic design. I wasn't that passionate. There was no story particularly. I couldn't tie it to anything, any aha moment in my life or anything like that. And so writing a post never occurred to me. But now, having done all this work around purpose and story, I just love the process of content creation. And when you love it, then um, you will stick with it. And that's the thing. You've got
yeah,
to love the journey, otherwise
yeah.
you'll never see it through enough to break through into whatever life you want to create for yourself. So yes.
Sorry, just
Mm.
just to jump in there, just to say, but it sounds to me that because you've been writing a lot and regularly, what happens, and this is the idea of flow. I'm sure it's something
Mm.
you're aware of, this idea of flow, and when you've started to write regularly and consistently, and this is what I sort of urge my clients to do, is to write regularly, because you unlock that flow, and
Mm.
that flow then makes it so easy to write. So initially, it's going to be a bit difficult because you're not yet writing consistently. But once you do, you have unlocked that sense of flow within you, the creative flow within you, and it then just, in a way, writes it for you. And so it's kind of hooking into that flow that all of us are capable of,
Yeah.
hooking into that and letting that be the thing that sort of takes you through it, carries you, flows right through you, but essentially that. So that's a very useful thing to remember as well, is this idea of flow and letting it work for you. And there's
Mm.
of course there's a whole industry out there about flow, but something perhaps listeners might be interested in sort of thinking about for themselves.
Yes, probably there's probably another podcast about that, in particular writing a book as well, which is something we might want to talk about next time because that is another challenge in itself.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting. So I went to a ceremony in the UK not so long ago, and one of the participants there said, "Oh, you know, so and so, he does a lot of music therapy. He's written a book." I was like, "Oh, right, okay. I've got a copy here." Um, he generated it with AI. It's like, and they're having this huge book about this subject, and I just wasn't interested at all. I mean, what is the point of me reading a book that's been generated by AI? It can't possibly know your story. There's going to be nothing. There's going to be no emotional hook or engagement. Yes, anybody could use AI to write a post or write a
Yeah.
book for you, but that's not the point. That's not going to resonate with anybody. And also, there's a journey you go on, isn't there? Writing content, writing a book, and you go for a lot of development in yourself by doing that, and the difficulties that come up. So that just struck me as another reason why you really need to kind of do this yourself, even though
Yeah.
there are all kinds of ways we can hack it in today's world. You know, it's really is about going through that process. It is difficult, but that's why it's so beneficial.
Yeah. There is, yeah, there's two sort of not angles, but two sides to that. One is, yes, for yourself, absolutely.
Mm.
You can't sort of outsource writing your story to
Yeah.
AI. So it's your personal journey, and it's for you to challenge yourself to get through because you learn through that process. But the other side of that is for your reader. If your reader knows, and people know when it's
Yeah,
AI
you can
or
tell. Yeah.
whatever, you can tell, right? AI will never suffer, and that's why your readers will never find
Yeah.
AI generated story as compelling as yours. AI doesn't know what it means to suffer. How
Mm.
could it possibly speak to the
Yeah.
human condition, to your life, my life, the things that we've had to? How can AI? It can give you lovely sound bites. My God, AI is so good for
Mm.
that. Such great sound bites and little phrases
Yes.
and language. Of course, scraped off the work of humans. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's a whole other conversation there. But I think it's really such a useful thing to remember that AI has never suffered and can never speak to what it means to be human.
The human condition.
And
Yeah.
in my shoes, in your shoes, in the shoes of all the listeners, it won't do that. And for that reason, it'll leave the reader cold because we are looking
Yes.
for, how did you survive? How did you thrive? And AI knows nothing of that. So anyway, so
Yes.
that's just my 5 piece rant about AI.
It's great. It is great. It's a powerful tool. I use it every day. What I'll usually do is write a post roughly. Okay, here's my story. Here's where I'm looking to get to at the end of it. And I'll write it out very roughly and I'll give it to AI and it'll just tidy it up and polish it. I think it's great for that. Or sometimes it's great for just giving you some ideas. Like, give me 10 ideas for a post today. Oh, there's something there. And then I can tie that into my story and a result I've had for a client. And then you can write it out, do a rough first draft, and then AI can just tidy it up for you grammatically, the flow, etc. And that's what it's great for. But if you let AI speak for you, then you're going to lose the audience, or you're not going to
Yeah.
engage. I think there's definitely a line there. But
Yeah.
beautiful, thank you, Shauna. Where can people go if they'd like to learn more? Is there anything you'd like to direct people towards?
Um, I have my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn account is, well, I'm Shauna Madhavan on LinkedIn, so that's a great
I'll
place
drop
to.
the link in the comments.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me, Mark. It's been great talking to you. Had a great time
Pleasure,
talking about
pleasure. Yeah,
my pet thing. Stories, and more stories is my obsession now.
stories
So
are well. This is the thing. It's Shauna's bonus module in my Pathway to Purpose program is right in the middle of the program. And the first half is about the inner work, healing and awareness. The second half is about connecting with passion and values and audience and the future. And it's a beautiful session right in the middle of the program that takes people from the past into the present and then onto the future. Because we go right over the hero's journey of the person that's attending, and it's a really powerful session. Um, Yes, consistently on the last one, it was one of the ones that people love the most. So it's such a powerful journey to go through if you're creating a purpose-led business or a personal brand.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, for anyone who'd like to learn more about Shauna, I'll drop the links in the about section beneath. As usual, to learn more about me, thebuddhaspot.com, my free purpose alignment assessment, so you can see how aligned you are with purpose at the moment and get next steps for deeper alignment. And that's it for today. Thank you, Shauna, for joining. Hopefully,
Thank
we'll
you,
do this
Mark.
again
Thanks
at
so
some point in
much.
the future. We've got so much other
Definitely.
things to talk around this subject as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been great fun. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
And we'll leave it there for today. Thanks for watching. We're back next week. Bye for now.